Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. I want to pick up on this idea that we left off on, which is that treatments, there is hope on that front. Specifically on remdesivir, that drug that's made by Gilead, we've talked about it on Face the Nation before, it shortens recovery time. It was a sign of hope, but now we are hearing that there may not be enough of it. Does the administration need to be doing more? I know HHS said that they're purchasing 500,000 doses of it, but is that going to meet the need?
Well, look, we need to accept the fact that we're in the second wave right now. 2 months ago, there were about 10 states where the reproduction number was above 10, meaning they had expanding epidemics. Now there's 40. So we're in that second wave. And there's not a clear line of sight on how we're going to get this under control, so it makes us more and more dependent on technology. And there's only a handful of technologies that may be available between now and the end of the year. Remdesivir is one of them. We have enough of the drug if the epidemic stays at its current level, and we continue to use remdesivir as it's approved for patients who are more sick and hospitalized. But if the epidemic worsens and we want to extend use of the drug to patients who aren't as ill, but have pre-existing conditions that predict that they may become very sick, we don't have enough drug for that. And that's what we would have wanted. We would have had to set the groundwork for that months ago, and we didn't do that. I think right now we need to be planning for other drugs that may become available this fall, like the therapeutic antibodies, and make sure we invest right now in manufacturing capacity and have a coordinated strategy on that so we can have them if those drugs do become available.
When you say we, who do you mean? Is that something that needs to come from the White House? Is that something Congress has to mandate? Are we looking for corporations to decide to do this themselves?
Well, the corporations are doing it themselves. There's a lot of collaboration going on, discussion between pharmaceutical companies about trying to free up capacity to increase the manufacturing of these drugs. I think we need a more coordinated national strategy around this. There's things the government can do to either pay companies not to produce certain drugs or try to consolidate manufacturing for products we don't really need right now, or maybe boost manufacturing in the short term and freeze some of those drugs, put them on hold so you can free up the domestic manufacturing capacity. We don't have a lot of excess domestic manufacturing capacity for these drugs, so we need a strategy to try to free that up. And it doesn't mean the government steps in and uses the Defense Production Act to take over facilities. There's ways that they can work with companies to try to coordinate this. That's what should be happening, particularly around the antibodies. We missed the window to do it on remdesivir. Because that drug has a long manufacturing cycle, we're unlikely to be able to ramp up supply between now and the end of the year. And that's when we would have needed it, because we face a hard fall. We're going to take all this infection into the fall and winter. It's not clear that it's going to get better. We're going to have epidemics that come and go across the nation in different cities. They'll light up at different times. But we're not going to really be able to crush this virus at this point because there's just so much infection around. Yeah. We really don't seem to have the political will to do it.
You told us in April on this program that doctors should not be using hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19. Do you stand by that recommendation now?
Well, that's certainly clear. There's been definitive studies that show that it doesn't provide benefit to hospitalized patients, and it doesn't work as a prophylaxis. So if you take it when you're exposed, it doesn't prevent infection. There's still some studies underway looking at whether it could be helpful in mildly symptomatic patients on an outpatient basis. But most of the evidence that's been turned over to answer that question isn't suggested that there's a benefit. So I don't think anyone should be using it right now, pending results of another study that might demonstrate that there is, in fact, a benefit, because the margin of all the data we've gotten from all the credible studies really shows no benefit, and in some cases, increased risk.
All right. Dr. Gottlieb, always good talking to you.
Thanks a lot.
We want to go now to former National Security Advisor John Bolton. He has a new book out. You might have heard about it, about his time in the administration, called The Room Where It Happened. Good morning to you, Ambassador.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Glad to have you back on Face the Nation. I want to talk about a number of topics with you, but you, in your book, lay out a number of incidents in which you came to the point of potentially resigning, but you stuck with it for about 17 months. The president, however, continues to refer back to one specific incident on this program with you as the reason for your relationship going south. It was a comment about North Korea. I want to play it. Is it a requirement that Kim Jong-un agree to give away those weapons before you give any kind of concession?
I think that's right. I think we're looking at the Libya model of 2003, 2004.
The president told Fox News that was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen on television. Was it that moment that ruined your relationship?
Well, who knows? I guess the president's discontent with me ought to have him asking who hired that guy to begin with. Maybe he's the one who needs to be fired. You know, I don't think I could be clearer in talking about the Libya model of 2003, 2004. We had a clear strategic decision from Muammar Gaddafi to give up Libya's nuclear weapons program. We have never gotten that from North Korea. So the fact that 7 or 8 years later, in the midst of the Arab Spring, Gaddafi was overthrown,
right.
Nobody predicted in 2003, 2004. I'll stand by my comment. One day the president will learn a little history and he'd be better off for it.
Does the president and his thinking get more shaped by television or government advisors?
Well, I think it's a combination of television and listening to people outside the government that he trusts for one reason or another. I think that if you could clock the amount of time he spent actually in the Oval Office versus the amount of time he spends in the little dining room off the Oval Office with the cable news networks of one form or another on, it would be a very interesting statistic.
I want to move on to some issues on the national security front. You're not in government anymore, but I know you watch Iran closely. There have been at least 3 mysterious explosions in the past few days, specifically one at the Natanz nuclear site. Does this look like U.S. or Israeli sabotage to you?
Well, nobody's claiming credit for it except a dissident group inside Iran. The Iranian government itself is trying not to comment on it. The Israeli government is not commenting. It's not clear whether this is the precursor of a larger attack or not. But if somebody is beginning the process of taking down Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program, I say more power to them. And if they have some spare time, maybe they could try the same on North Korea.
Well, we'll see what we hear from government officials. The Israelis are not confirming, as you mentioned there. On Afghanistan and Russia, as you know, the current National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, has acknowledged that the U.S. did indeed have intelligence that Russia was paying bounties for American dead. But he said that information was withheld by a CIA officer from the president, even though it was in the brief. Were you ever aware of bounties when you were a national security advisor?
Well, I'm not going to comment on what I knew or didn't know out of the intelligence, but I do think it's important for people to understand intelligence doesn't come in only 2 qualities, the fully verified intelligence and then the unverified intelligence.
Well, I want to narrow in on this because this morning, I just want to make sure you know, this morning, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor to President Obama, went on television on another network and said the information came to light in 2019 when you were in the job, and she believes you would have told the president. Is she wrong? Did you know about that?
Well, I've said in countless other interviews, I'm not going to disclose classified information. I've got a struggle with the president trying to repress my book on that score already. I will say this, all intelligence is distributed along a spectrum of uncertainty. And this intelligence in 2020, by the administration's own admission, was deemed credible enough to give to our allies. So the notion that you only give the really completely 100% verified intelligence to the president would mean you give him almost nothing. And that's just not the way the system works. And it's certainly not a decision made only by the briefer who briefs the president twice a week. That's a decision that, at least when I was there, would have been made by the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of the CIA, myself, and the briefer together.
Right. Well, I mean, this information that Russia was providing weapons and money to the Taliban was made public in 2018 by the then commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. So you may have known about it when you were in that job. I'm wondering if you are, in your remarks today, sort of politely saying that the current National Security Advisor failed in his job.
Look, I don't want to make this a matter of personalities. And by the way, what was made public in 2018 was Russian assistance to the Taliban, and that's been known for some time. That alone is troubling. What is particularly troubling, if true, is this latest information that they were providing compensation for killing Americans. And that is the kind of thing that, that you go to the president on and say, look, Mr. President, heads up, we may not know everything on this, but a nuclear power is reportedly providing bounties to kill Americans. That's the kind of thing you need to have in the president's view so that he can think about it as he develops, well, at least as normal presidents develop strategy to handle Russia, to handle Afghanistan.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you, in your book, were very critical of some of your fellow cabinet members. Nikki Haley, you really unloaded on her. You called her untethered, a free electron. You mentioned her going on this program and saying things she shouldn't have said about Russia. You seem to have a pretty low regard for someone who's viewed as having a bright future within the Republican Party. Why did you do that?
Well, she wrote about this, conversation on your show in her book, and it was inaccurate. And I just felt that it was important to get the record straight. I really wrote this book in large measure for history. Other people will write their books, and scholars in the future will sort it out. I wrote as best I could recollect what I saw, and I thought that was important when somebody actually gets the title of their book out of the incident and the facts are wrong.
Ambassador Bolton, always interesting to talk to you. We will leave it there, and we'll be right back with a look at some good economic news this week. The U.S. added 4.8 million jobs in June, but that data was compiled before the coronavirus spikes that started mid-month. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, joins us now from Philadelphia this morning. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Margaret.
You had already predicted this would be the shortest but arguably most severe recession in history. What did we learn from the data we got this week?
Well, it was good, about as good as you could expect. Almost 5 million jobs were created during the month. That's on top of 2.7 million in the month of May. So we've gotten about a third of the jobs back that we lost in March and April. Unemployment declined. Properly measured, it's about 12%. Hard to imagine that that's a good number, but it is a good number compared to 20%, which we got in April. That was the peak. But here's the thing, Margaret, the unfortunate thing, the unexpected better economic news is the result of the very rapid increase in business reopenings. Too fast, because now the virus is re-intensifying and the pandemic is raging in a lot of key states across the country. They're pulling back, and that's not in the data yet. That's coming down the road. So I fear that the best economic news was in June, and as we look to July and going forward, the job statistics are going to look meaningfully worse. The pandemic is a real issue now.
And these states that are seeing these spikes are important to the U.S. economy, very large economies, Texas, California, Florida. How much do you expect to see consumers pull back?
They're big. I mean, if you add up California, Texas, Florida, let's throw in Arizona, you're now talking about over a fifth of the economy, probably closer to a third of the economy right there. And I do expect that we're going to see pullbacks by businesses in those states. And here's the thing. It's not just businesses that are directly impacted. It's not just restaurants and retailers. I think all businesses are going to be nervous about the uncertainty that this all creates. And so they're going to become even more cautious in hiring back workers. And then, of course, you've got consumers, you and I. We already had one hand on the bunker. I can't imagine that many of us aren't going to go right back into the bunker as a result of all this and wait this out. So this is very disconcerting. And if Dr. Fauci is right and we're headed towards 100,000 per day, I think the prospects of going back into recession are pretty high.
Well, we know certainly at the White House and on Capitol Hill, they're going to have to take a look at what kind of emergency aid will need to be provided in light of some of this changing information that we're receiving. In your view, do you think Congress needs to provide some kind of help to American families? 80 million Americans have children under the age of 18. They can't necessarily send them back to school in the summer, maybe not in the fall. Child care is also in question. How important is it to address that specific challenge?
critical. It's absolutely critical. If Congress and the administration don't get it together in the next few weeks before Congress goes away on its August recess, I fear we're going back into recession because the economy needs a lot of help. And you point out there's a lot of, even though unemployment's back down, if you add up folks that are unemployed, people who have got their hours cut, that they're still working, but they got their hours cut, and then consider those folks that are still working, haven't gotten their hours cut, but got their pay cut, you're talking about a third of all American workers that are still struggling here. And if they don't get some additional help on, and as you know, the unemployment insurance expansion that was part of the original help to the economy is going away in 2 to 3 weeks. So if Congress and administration don't figure out how to provide more help to these folks, they're going to have absolutely no choice but to stop paying bills, cut spending, and the economy is really going to struggle. Here's the other thing. State and local governments are hemorrhaging red ink, right? So every state and local government across the country, it doesn't matter whether you're in a Republican state or a Democratic state, you're hemorrhaging red ink, and they're slashing payrolls. And these are middle income jobs. They're teachers, they're fire, they're police, they're emergency responders. These are the kinds of folks we need working at any time, but particularly in a pandemic. So it's just absolutely critical that Congress doesn't take the wrong message from the June jobs number and says, okay, mission accomplished, we're okay here. We're far from it. They need to provide a lot more help, and very soon.
But what about the specific child care issue? How does Congress solve that?
Well, you're right. They have to provide support through to support for child care on the other side of during the pandemic, and once schools during the summer, and if schools don't reopen. So there has to be additional support there. There's different ways of providing that support: direct aid to people who are unemployed, or through unemployment insurance, or through the tax code. There's a child tax credit that could be used to make it refundable to different households so that they can get cash back if they have child care needs. But all those things need to be part of any additional support that Congress comes forward with, and hopefully, again, they come forward with that quickly here.
And we'll be covering it. Mark Zandi, thank you. We'll be back in a moment. Summer vacation looks a lot different this season. Short distance road trips, visits to national parks, or for some, no trips at all. For a look at how Americans are thinking about travel, we know you're at least thinking about it, TripAdvisor CEO Stephen Kaufer joins us from his home in Newton, Massachusetts this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
So travel was supposed to be inching back up this summer. Now we have these spikes in the South and in the West. What is that doing to the consumers that you are watching?
Yeah, so if you look at the traffic on our site, and we have hundreds of millions of visitors on TripAdvisor each and every month, you look at the top searches, and I think 5 or 6 of the top 10 a couple of weeks ago were all wonderful southern beaches: Texas, Arizona, Florida, great places to go, but that switched. Everyone's moving essentially up north, away from all these hotspots, which is totally understandable given the safety concerns that 9 out of 10 travelers tell us are most important.
We hear the president continue to float this idea of giving a potential tax credit to Americans if they take a vacation. We don't know that Congress will take that up, but I'm wondering in the travel industry if you think, or if you're betting on needing that.
I think everyone in the travel industry is really, really concerned about this slip backwards that we've now seen in the US. And what's best for the travel industry, at least my opinion, is really getting the pandemic under control. And that isn't about a tax credit for someone to take a vacation. It's really about leadership from our federal government, from the state governments, from local governments, all telling people to do the basic things that everybody needs to do to keep us all safe. That's what'll get travel going again in this country.
And safety is the #1 priority that you are seeing in the consumers who are looking to travel and to book something right now. I mean, how do you offer that to someone on the other end of a computer screen?
Yeah, so we asked hundreds of or thousands of people, and they said 9 out of 10 said safety is the most important thing that they are looking for when planning this next trip. So we went out as TripAdvisor, like the premier travel guidance company, and said, how can we help our travelers really understand the details about what makes a hotel or a restaurant or a thing to do safe for them. So we went out to all of the businesses, 8+ million businesses on our site, and said, come tell us, come tell all the audience that is on our site everything that you as an individual business are doing to help keep your guests safe. And as of this morning, close to 50,000 different businesses had uploaded some information already. And this was just a program that was launched last week. So we expect many, many more.
We know different American airlines are going to the government to get emergency help. We saw new terms negotiated just this week. And I wonder if you are seeing Americans have the confidence to go and buy a ticket on a plane a few months out. Are they confident that airline isn't going to go bankrupt?
I don't think they're worried about airlines going bankrupt, but they remain concerned about their health. And to the degree that the whole country can come together, as much of Europe has done, and really take a concerted effort to treat everyone safe, doing everything they can to make sure everyone feels safe when they travel.
But what does that mean? Does that mean masks are sort of the magic solution for a business to provide confidence? Does it mean face shields? Does it mean something specific? Like, how do you actually trust the safety measures?
I'm personally less worried about getting on an airplane if I have a mask and I know every other passenger is wearing their mask. That would make me feel personally safe to go to a place if that place is not now a hotspot of coronavirus. So again, with government recommendations, with our president, with all of the national leaders saying this is what every American of every political persuasion should be doing, I think that would go a tremendous way to really helping start the downward trend in cases. If you look at what Massachusetts is doing, we have a Republican governor, Charlie Baker, led by science, who's looking at opening up the state after we clearly took care of the coronavirus. Down to hundreds now, and he's opening up very slowly.
Okay. Well, we will see. Thank you very much, Stephen Kaufer from TripAdvisor. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. And many of you were not able to attend fireworks last night, or there were no fireworks displays to actually attend. So we want to leave all of you with some of the country's best displays. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.